This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And my name is Josh Strickland, and I'm continuing this trend of recording this podcast in the most random places. I am currently in a closet. I'm at my parents' apartment right now, and the closet just has the best acoustics because, you know, the clothes block the sound from bouncing back, so it just sounds the best. It's way better than where I was last week, where I was in the most echoey room of all time. So hopefully this sounds a little better for all of you out there. So let's go ahead and get into it. We have a great show for you tonight. We'll talk about the Houston Rockets, the Pocket Rockets facing the LA Clippers, which is one of the major battles that they'll have in the playoffs. We'll move on and talk about Steph Curry coming back, his return to the NBA. Then we'll talk about Quentin Williams getting arrested. We'll talk about the Panthers and Chargers swapping offensive linemen. And we'll talk about minor league promotions. And then, of course, we'll continue Bracket Mania with my Disney bracket. 16 Disney movies, and I have to choose one. So we'll get into that at the end of the show. Let's go ahead and start with our first topic. I watched the Houston Rockets face the Los Angeles Clippers. This game happened Thursday night, I believe, and this was a hyped up matchup because it was kind of the Rockets' first challenge since they played the Lakers with this new lineup. And when they played the Lakers, that was like the first time or the second time they ran with this lineup. Now they're facing the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, everyone healthy. This is a fully operational Los Angeles Clippers roster, and everybody wanted to see how the Houston Rockets will fare against the NBA final favorites, the Western Conference favorites, the LA Clippers. Well, it didn't end well. The big issue, the big question going into this game was how the Clippers were going to react to the Rockets' small ball offense, the Pocket Rockets, as people have liked to call them. So that was an interesting point because, I mean, this could be a playoff matchup. These two teams could easily play off in a series during the playoffs. So how would the Clippers play? How would their rotation work? How would their lineups work against the Houston Rockets, who are going to spread the court out? So maybe your the centers that the Clippers have, are probably not going to be as effective as they usually would be against a normal NBA offense. So Zubac and Harrell, they face off against the Rockets' five-out offense. Face off against the five-out offense and see how they deal with spreading the floor. Can they close in on shots? Can they rotate? Can they stop layups and just athletic moves happening? Well, I think they did a pretty good job. Zubac had 17 points, 12 rebounds, and 2 blocks. Harrell had 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks as well. And they held their own defensively against the Pocket Rockets. So through 3 quarters, the Clippers held the Rockets to 30% shooting, 3 of 34 from beyond the arc, and Westbrook and Harden combined to shoot 15 of 44 from the floor. Houston finished 7 of 42 on three-pointers, and 25 of those 42 attempts were contested. So, based off those numbers, the Clippers did a really good job at contesting the shots, as more than half were contested. But I think this says more about how the Houston Rockets are officially live by the three or die by the three, as that's kind of required. I mean, they were getting open looks. They were getting options going on there, but nothing was just really falling for the Rockets here in this game. And Houston, you have a problem. You can't do that against the Clippers of all teams, because the Clippers are going to, beat you. Can't do that to the Clippers of all teams. And then you can't do that in general. I mentioned before that I do think this team could be pretty good in the regular season. It's just when you get into the playoffs and face teams that are better at defense, then you're going to have bigger issues. So James Harden finished with 16 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, while Russell Westbrook went off and had 29 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists. So Russell Westbrook had a pretty good game overall. PJ Tucker, who is technically the center in this whole thing, he only had 3 points, 6 rebounds. Robert Covington had 9 rebounds. And yeah, Russell Westbrook led the team with 15 rebounds, which, like I mentioned before, he's athletic enough for that to work, but you're getting out-rebounded, nothing's falling, and this game ended a lot closer than it looked. It ended 120-105, but the Rockets were getting pretty much pummeled throughout this whole game, as, like I said, no shots were falling, and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were fully operational in this game. Kawhi Leonard had 25 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Marcus Morris had 11 points. Zubac, as I said, had 17. Paul George had 9 assists, 7 assists, 9 rebounds, and 13 points. Harrell, 19 points, as I mentioned before. The Clippers seem to be fully operational now, and we're heading into the last stretch of games, and they're just hitting their stride, where over the past 6 games, they're posting a .17 point differential and a .16 net rating. They are now healthy. This is a completely healthy Clippers team, and because of that, they are on a 6-game winning streak. So the final stretch of games are going to be interesting. I don't think they're going to catch up with the Lakers. I don't think the Clippers are going to even attempt to catch up with the Lakers, as they're going to continue resting Kawhi and resting Paul George to make sure that they are fully healthy going into the playoffs, because that's when it matters. They are number 2 in the West currently, and there is no reason for them to really worry about anything at the moment. We can let me pull up the rest of their schedule for this season here. So they face off against the Lakers tonight, I believe. They face off the Lakers today at 3:30 on ABC. Then they play Golden State. They play Brooklyn. They play the Pelicans, which the Pelicans will be an interesting game because Zion versus Kawhi. If Kawhi plays that game, they play the Nuggets. Play the Suns, which would be a win. They play the Knicks, which should be the win. Nets, Pistons, Hornets. This is a fairly easy schedule, all things considering. You play the Lakers, which of course you have the Lake Show with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and then you play Golden State, which has Steph Curry, and Steph Curry can, by himself, kind of pull the Warriors at least close to the Clippers, but I still think the Clippers come away with that, with a victory. But other than that, they play the Nuggets, they play the Pelicans and the Mavericks back-to-back, which will probably be a difficult stretch. They play the Pelicans, Mavericks, and Nuggets 3 games in a row, so that'll be a difficult stretch right there. But other than that, it's a pretty easy schedule. They play the Lakers again on April 9th. Then after that, they play the Timberwolves, Blazers to end the game and end the season. So it seems like they're going to be coasting through the rest of the season. They're not playing that difficult of competition. They've pretty much already clinched. They didn't clinch a playoff spot yet, but they've pretty much already done that. So, yeah, the Clippers are just going to be coasting for the rest of the time, especially since the next team in the standings are the Nuggets. The Nuggets are right behind them, 1 game behind them, but they're going to be coasting for the rest of the season. The Lakers are probably also going to be coasting as well, as we take a quick look at the Lakers schedule. Lakers might have a little bit more difficulty. Clippers, they play the Rockets, which I think they're going to beat the Rockets, manhandle them. Play the Jazz back-to-back, play the Nuggets. Other than that, they also have a pretty easy schedule. So pretty much both the Lakers and the Clippers are going to be coasting. The Lakers clinched a playoff spot, so they're going to start coasting big time. They definitely want the number 1 seed, of course, but they're going to be coasting, especially after they beat the Milwaukee Bucks Friday night. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the Clippers, the Lakers, and how the Rockets all function when we head into the rest of the season. When we come back, we talk about the return of Chef Curry.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Thursday night, I decided to check in at 10:30 at night as I am on the East Coast over here in the beautiful state of South Carolina. And I got done watching the Houston Rockets get destroyed by the Clippers Thursday night. And what is up next? Well, after I started watching the 1976 Game 5 of the NBA Finals, because I was on NBA TV at the same time as the Houston Rockets versus the Clippers, and I got tired of watching the Rockets versus the Clippers, so I turned on the 1976. NBA Finals, and yeah, you want to talk about a sudden shift in just basketball in general? Yeah, how about you watch 1976 NBA and then compare it to Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors, because I was watching the 1976 NBA Finals. It was Boston Celtics versus the Phoenix Suns, and there was legit a good 5-minute period where no one made a shot. There was no three-point line. No one even attempted a shot outside of the paint for a solid full quarter. Someone hit a corner three, which was very impressive, I bet, for that time, but it was just completely different. And then just imagine the jarring change to go from that, which was a great triple overtime game, by the way. It's a legendary game, I've been told. The jarring difference to go from that to then watching the Golden State Warriors versus the Toronto Raptors with Steph Curry coming back to the NBA. And I forgot how exciting Steph Curry is. So the Golden State Warriors, of course, they play the Toronto Raptors, which is the team that they lost to in the NBA Finals. Everybody was saying this is the death of the dynasty, as Kevin Durant left to go to Brooklyn, and Klay Thompson tore his ACL, so he's out. And then Steph Curry broke his hand, and he was out for a while. So now Steph Curry is back. He is back. How did he do? Well, the Warriors still lost. Just so you know, they lost 121-113, but Curry had 23 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. He played 27 minutes of play. The Warriors, of course, didn't want to play Curry for more than 30 minutes, but the game was close going into the fourth quarter, so they kind of staggered his minutes towards the end of the game so he could still come in with a minute to go and kind of try to push the Warriors to a victory there. He knocked down 2 foul shots with a minute to go to trail by 2 points, but it wasn't enough as the Warriors still fall. They're still hopeless, as Curry was the only player for the Warriors that had any finals experience. which is impressive. Because the Warriors have been to the finals, 4 or 5 years in a row, and you only have a single player that has any final experiences at the moment, because Draymond Green was injured, Klay Thompson was injured, and now you have Steph Curry finally back. He had a great game. He had a pretty good game, especially for the first game that came back. His left hand looked fine. He seemed to be dribbling fine. He seemed to be making passes fine. I forgot how exciting it was to watch Steph Curry play. He was making amazing behind-the-back passes to Andrew Wiggins. He was making lobs to Marquise Chris for dunks. And he drained a 32-footer as the shot clock struck 0. Steph Curry is exciting, and I completely forgot about how exciting he was for the NBA. He made me excited to watch this game between the second best team in the East and the worst team in the West. Worst team in the NBA, period. But it is still sad because you have Steph Curry, who's trying his hardest. He can't play all the minutes he wants to play because they're easing him back into it. And you kind of just watch Steph Curry playing with all these scrubs that can't really do much. I mean, Andrew Wiggins was out there, of course. But I mean, yeah, the biggest issue I had was in a couple episodes ago when I was mentioning should Steph Curry come back? Why should he come back? I think I mentioned this last Sunday's episode, because he was supposed to return Sunday. But the fact is, how would he play with Andrew Wiggins? And he seemed to be playing just fine, as Andrew Wiggins also had 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists, and a block. So Andrew Wiggins played pretty well. Steph Curry, like I said, 23, 7, and 7. And 8 for 8 from free throws, by the way. So pretty good. But at the end of the day, the Warriors overall lost in pretty much every category. They actually beat the Raptors in rebounds. But they lost pretty much every category. The Raptors had 10 steals. Warriors had more turnovers. So overall, this Warriors team is still very much a work in progress, still very much recovering from all the losses that they had. But so let's talk about the other players on the Warriors. You had Damian Lee, who scored 23 points. He missed 2 free throws and a wide-open 3 inside 25 seconds. Wiggins, as I mentioned before, Wiggins had 21 points. Chris contributed 17 points and 12 rebounds. Pascal had 16 points off the bench. The Warriors launched 52 three-pointers, which is setting a franchise high, which, once again, that's impressive since this is one of the best three-point shooting teams of all time the past couple years. And they set the franchise record for attempted three-pointers in this game. They are 3 more losses away from being eliminated from playoff contention, which they will probably be eliminated from playoff. There's a potential that they can go on a 18-2 run or something like that to make the playoffs, but it's very unlikely. A lot of things have to go their way for them to even sniff the playoffs, especially with the Timberwolves and the Pelicans, teams like that, and of course the Trailblazers, who still are alive in the Western Conference. So very unlikely that the Warriors will make the playoffs, but it's fun to dream about it, you know. But like I said, it was exciting to see Steph Curry out there once again. He looked great. He was making these pretty electric plays. I hate this cliche to say that the league is better with him in it, because I feel like everyone says that about everyone. Like people say that about teams, people say that about players, but Steph Curry just brings a certain kind of athleticism and certain kind of pizzazz that the NBA was sorely missing. Because when your big stars are LeBron James, which LeBron James is great, but his big contribution to electrifying people is just kind of dunking on people, which is great and all. Love it. But it gets kind of old, especially with LeBron James, because he doesn't really talk to the media that much, and he's not very much a personality. Then you have Kawhi Leonard, who's not a personality at all. So the Raptors, on the other hand, they are the second team in the East to qualify for the playoffs behind the Milwaukee Bucks. Norman Powell set a career high with 37 points against the Golden State Warriors. Kyle Lowry added 26 points. Siakam added 17 points. Ibaka returned from a 3-game absence to contribute 13 points and 13 rebounds. So the Raptors are now officially in the playoffs over there in the Eastern Conference. So they'll probably start coasting for the rest of the season, the rest of the regular season, as they have already clinched a playoff spot. So next up, so the Bucks and the Raptors have already clinched spots. Next up there, you have the Celtics at 3, Miami Heat at 4, 76ers at 5. And then you have the Pacers at 6, which the Pacers sitting pretty. Then after that, you have a huge drop-off when you have the Brooklyn Nets, who just got a new coach, which I'll talk about that on the Tuesday show, as that kind of happened like right before I started recording this. Yeah, the Magic, who the Magic have a chance at making the playoffs. The Hornets are only 6 games out of the playoffs with not a lot of games to go, but the Hornets could potentially make the playoffs. The Wizards right there at number 9. So the East playoff race is looking pretty good, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're just battling to see who gets swept by the Bucks and the Raptors. So it's unfortunate, but that's how it goes over there. And as I mentioned in the Western, Golden State, right now, they are 17 games out of 8th place, and there's about 20 games left in the season, I think. So they still have a chance. Highly doubt it. I'm not saying that I'm not giving that a lock. The Pelicans have kind of dropped down. The Pelicans have dropped to 11 in the Western Conference, as they've dropped a couple of games, but they've had a pretty tough schedule as of recently, as they played the Lakers twice in a week. So they did win their last game, but they're 5-5 in their last 10. So the playoff race is heating up. When we return, we'll talk about Quinnen Williams getting arrested at everyone's favorite airport.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we have a random arrest this offseason. So usually football players get arrested, which is just kind of the nature of the game at this point. I mean, it just kind of happens. Nobody really wants it to happen. It just kind of happens, you know. This one kind of surprised me, though, because this is a guy you didn't expect to get arrested. This is Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle for the New York Jets, formerly of the Alabama Crimson Tide. He was drafted in the first round by the Jets last year. He was expected to have a huge season as a anchor to that defensive line, but he did all right. He had an okay season, but he got into some trouble at everybody's favorite airport of LaGuardia, whatever you want to call it. Everyone's favorite airport. I've heard so many comedians, I've heard so many people from New York say that is the worst airport ever. And he got arrested Thursday night for criminal possession of a weapon. Now, what? Criminal possession of a weapon? So he attempted to board his flight at LaGuardia Airport with a Glock 19 handgun. The Port Authority Police Department said he is currently being processed by the Port Authority Police Department. So let's clarify some things. So he has a permit for this gun. However, that permit is in the state of Alabama. It's not registered in New York or New York City. It is unclear if the gun was loaded. Nobody's really mentioned that at all. Jets issued a statement Friday morning saying that we have been in contact with Quinnen Williams and are fully aware of the situation. We will have no additional comment at this time, as this is a pending legal matter. I mean, it just happened Thursday, so I mean, of course, not a lot going on there from a quote standpoint. There's not much to talk about yet because we don't know the full scope of everything. Williams' agent, Nicole Lynn of Young Money Sports, tweeted this out. Mr. Williams respects and follows the law. There was allegedly a technical issue with the manner in which the lawfully owned firearm was stored, and we expect the matter to be resolved shortly. Okay. Well, it might not be that simple. So carrying an unregistered loaded gun carries a minimum prison sentence of 3.5 years with potential for good behavior to reduce it. This particular charge is what former Giants receiver Plaxico Burress faced after suffering a self-inflicted gunshot wound at a New York nightclub in 2008, which is remains to be one of the strangest storylines I've ever heard in my life. So bullets don't need to be in the chamber for the gun to be considered loaded. You just need to have the gun. If you possess an unloaded gun and you also possess ammunition for that gun, the gun is considered to be loaded because you could still be able to put bullets in there and stuff like that. So, is he actually in danger of going to jail for 3.5 years at minimum? Is this actually a thing that could happen to this very large NFL football player that has braces? Which, by the way, just the image of him giving a big goofy smile with those braces and getting arrested for having a gun, that is just an insane image to put in my head, and I love it. It's hilarious. But, I mean, them's the breaks. That is the law. But this will likely be a Class E violent felony, which carries a maximum sentence of 1.5 or 1 1/3 to 4 years in state prison. But they'll probably plead to a lesser charge with no jail time because that's kind of how it works. I mean, in my opinion, this is kind of it is a story because he got arrested, but it's kind of a no story because I feel like it's a very simple mistake. He does have a license for the gun, just not in New York. He might have made a mistake in where he placed the gun when going onto the plane and stuff like that. I mean, he broke the law. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But I feel like it can be marked down as a simple mistake, and he would not face any prison time. And I know for a fact he's not going to face any prison time because the same thing happened to Daquan Bowers, another defensive lineman. He was a Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive lineman. He was arrested at LaGuardia in 2013 when he brought a gun that was legally owned and registered in Florida. Those charges were dropped 2 months later when Bowers then had to pay a $250 fine and pay off legal fees and stuff like that, which is way more than $250. But that's probably where Quinnen Williams will be going here. It's probably a simple mistake. He probably thought that his registration was perfectly fine in the whole country instead of just in the state of Alabama, which, by the way, the state of Alabama is probably very easy to get a gun. But we're not going to talk about that. But anyways, but yeah, I don't think he has any chance of going to jail for this. But it's just a funny story to think about. Think about that big, goofy, brace-filled smile in a mugshot. It's just funny to think about. But this brings me to the New York Jets. The New York Jets are a weird franchise, and it just adds on to my dislike for this facade that New York is the greatest sports market. And I mean, I had the Knicks rant. I won't rant again about how I feel about the city of New York, which I'm fine with the city. The city itself is fine. I just hate the fact that their sports franchises are kind of overinflated just because of where they are. But I won't get into that. we're going to talk about the New York Jets. So they hired Adam Gase last year. It was all right. Sam Darnold was okay last year. They drafted Quinnen Williams. Quinnen Williams had a okay year last year as well. But there's a lot of people thinking, is this actually going to work? Is the Adam Gase experiment actually going to work in the NFL or for the Jets? Will this actually work? Will anything go the Jets' way? So the Jets won their only Super Bowl, Super Bowl III. They are now the longest team without a Super Bowl berth, or they've gone the longest time without a Super Bowl berth since the Chiefs broke their streak this year and won the Super Bowl. They finished the last year 7-9, 5 games behind the New England Patriots, which 5 games is a lot. They weren't last place. Miami Dolphins were last place, which, I mean, Dolphins were considered one of the worst teams in the league last year. So they finished last in yards per game, 29th in passing yards, the 31st in rushing yards per game, 22nd in pass attempts, 23rd in pass completions. Opponents' passing yards was 16. Opponents' rushing yards were 31st in the league, which is pretty solid, actually. They were 23rd in the league in sacks, 19th in interceptions, 27th in passing touchdowns, 23rd in the league in passing interceptions. Sam Darnold had over 3,000 passing yards, which is pretty good. Le'Veon Bell, there were some issues with Le'Veon Bell towards the end of the year last year, where he and Adam Gase were kind of having some blows. I mean, who are the Jets going to draft? That is the big question. So they're already set at quarterback. You could argue that they could go for a running back or something like that. So right now, the projection has them going for Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle from Georgia. So they're expected to be aggressive in free agency, especially on the offensive line, to protect Sam Darnold. And Thomas will definitely help that. Thomas played left and right tackle at Georgia. Has some balance issues, apparently, but he projects as a steady NFL starter. So the Jets are going to improve that offensive line, get Sam Darnold a little bit more help, which will be good, so he's not getting murdered every day. But the Jets' defense is pretty solid. They were pretty solid last year. So, yeah, they could go for a center in the second round. This mock draft I'm looking at has Lloyd Cushenberry from LSU, center in the second round. In the third round, they could go for a receiver. Michael Pittman from Southern Cal could go receiver. So, Jets, they're going to be upgrading. Robbie Anderson's a free agent. Robbie Anderson had huge highs and very low lows with the Jets. So, I mean, re-signing Robbie Anderson might be in the cards. We're not really 100% positive. But the Jets, honestly, are looking pretty good. And depending on what the Patriots do, they could potentially make a run for that division. I mean, you had the Bills. The Bills went 10-6. Bills are going to be building upon their success, of course. But the Patriots probably will take a step back, especially if Tom Brady doesn't come back. But then again, the Patriots had one of the worst offensive years they've ever had, and they went 12-4. But, you know, that division's a wild card anyway. So when we return, we'll be talking about the newest trade that happened between the Panthers and the Chargers as they swapped offensive linemen when we come back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we have a brand new trade, which once again will not go into effect until March 18th, which is the start of the new league year. So once again, 10 days away from that. So we have 10 more days to kind of speculate about free agency and trades and stuff like that. But teams are still making trades and having agreements in principle for the new league year. Another trade that happened, the Carolina Panthers and the Los Angeles Chargers, two teams that were kind of the bottom of the barrel last year. Carolina Panthers, of course, missing their starting quarterback Cam Newton. Chargers just didn't have a very good offense. So both teams have agreed for a player-for-player trade, straight-up trade, player for player, where the Panthers sent five-time Pro Bowler Trey Turner to the Chargers in exchange for a two-time Pro Bowl veteran left tackle Russell Okung. So Okung has been pretty steady in his 9 years in the league. He rarely missed time, rarely missed any games until last season when he suffered a couple of injuries, including a groin injury. He's a former first-round pick out of Oklahoma State, and he's expected to immediately start for the Panthers in 2020, despite their returning last year's second-round pick Greg Little. So where is Greg Little going to fit in all this? Where does he was picked in the second round last year? So where does Greg Little fit in all of this? So Greg Little suffered 2 concussions and a high ankle sprain last season, which is not a very good start to your rookie year, not a very good start to your NFL career, getting 2 concussions and a high ankle sprain. So the Panthers are reasonably kind of worried about his longevity in the league. So, and also for the fact that he missed so much time. He only played 4 games, I believe. He only played in 4 games, so the Panthers are worried about his development. He didn't have a lot of time to develop over the season because he only played 4 games and he was injured. He was in and out all the time. So this trade helps the Panthers get another guy in there, so Greg Little will have more time to develop and practice and get a little better. So Okung is on his final year of his contract, so, I mean, he's not going to be sticking around for a while. Greg Little is definitely still the future if he can stay healthy for the Panthers at the tackle position, left tackle position. It's just the fact that he didn't get a lot of time to develop, didn't get a lot of time to train, do all that stuff because he was in and out of concussion protocol, and then, of course, the high ankle sprain, which is deadly to an offensive lineman. So the Panthers, they traded up for him last year. So, I mean, they're going to stick with him. They put a lot of capital into him, and they're going to be trying to develop him more as the season goes on. So trading Turner for Okung, Turner was only 26, and Okung is 32, and he's a 2-time Pro Bowler as opposed to the 5-time Pro Bowler that Trey Turner was. But it solidifies the tackle position for the Carolina Panthers, which is a tougher position to fill than the offensive guard, which Trey Turner was. It also rids the Panthers of Turner's $15.3 million cap hit in 2021, where Okung will make $13 million in 2020, which is the final year of his contract. So there's some money side issues, there's some depth issues that the Panthers are definitely filling in here, but the issue is you now have a open guard position. Are you going to move someone to guard and develop them that way, like Greg Little? Could he potentially move to guard, or are they going to pick up a guard in free agency? Or are they going to trade for a guard? I know Trent Williams is available from the Trent Williams is the left tackle, but he's available from the Redskins. Will the Panthers potentially make a trade with the Redskins for that? Or will they draft someone? Let me pull up that mock draft that I had pulled up a little bit ago. So it's going to be very interesting to see the Panthers, how they kind of go through everything. So another thing is, are the Panthers rebuilding? Which is a very important question. They got a new coach, new offensive coordinator. They still have the same GM, but we have a brand new coach. We got rid of Ron Rivera. The Panthers got rid of Ron Rivera because the owner was David Tepper, by the way. David Tepper was tired of mediocrity. So we're going with a new coach, brand new coach, Matt Rule, from Baylor, from Temple, had a great resume in college football as a head coach. Now he's coaching his first NFL team. You have Joe Brady, who is passing coordinator for LSU this past season, and he was a offensive analyst for the New Orleans Saints, and now he's straight to the top with an offensive coordinator position here. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Panthers are going to navigate this. So the big question, of course, is Cam Newton. Cam Newton, of course, depending on his health, will probably be the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. The organization has not made any moves as of late, which they can't really make moves if Cam Newton's not healthy, but they might be deciding that 1 year with Cam Newton's at least worth a shot. If Cam Newton plays, then the Panthers easily add 2 or 3 wins onto their win total, as opposed to starting Will Grier or Allen again. So Cam Newton's a huge part of that. Then, of course, you want to know how the first-time NFL offensive coordinator Joe Brady does, how he will kind of use everything that he did at LSU, how he'll use it in the NFL, and how he'll use it for the Panthers. With the Panthers, have a pretty good receiving core. They just need a quarterback to throw it to, throw them the ball, which Cam Newton can do it. So it'll be interesting to see how Joe Brady uses this offense, especially with Christian McCaffrey, which is one of the most electric players in the NFL. And then, of course, you have the defense, this Carolina defense that will have to go from worst to first for the Panthers to have a shot at contending in 2020. So the Panthers are in a really weird situation where they have a good chance at contending for the division, winning the division against the Saints, but they also have a really good chance at being the worst team in the league. There's a lot of different factors going into it, but let's look at this mock draft and see who they potentially could get next month at the NFL draft. So they had the number 7 pick. They could take, this mock draft has them taking Jeff Okudah from Ohio State. He's a cornerback. He's a prototype at the cornerback position. He will be a steal outside the top 5. So, I mean, if he drops to 7, they would be remiss to not take him. Which, I mean, there's a lot of ifs to that. This mock draft is saying that Chase Young will go to Washington, Isaiah Simmons will go to Detroit at number 3. It also says Justin Herbert will get drafted by the Dolphins, and Tua Tagovailoa will go to the Chargers. So there's got a lot of ifs there. I feel like any of those teams could easily get Okudah, and the Panthers will go reeling and try to find someone else. But the main reason they're looking at him, he offers fundamental size, athleticism, coverage awareness required to play cornerback at a high level in the NFL. His character will also be a great fit for what Matt Rule is looking to build in Carolina. Now we move on to their second-round pick. They could go with a free safety from LSU with Grant Delpit. Free safety from LSU. So that, just to solidify that secondary just a little bit more, add some more pieces in there. And then in the third round, they could get James Lynch, who's a defensive lineman from Baylor. Lynch maintains a close relationship with Matt Rule, and the Panthers don't address the defensive line in the first 2 rounds. This pick makes a lot of sense. So Panthers, they could go many different ways. They could address defensive line in the first round or the second round, or they could go with Jeff Okudah. I'm pretty sure they'll go defensive line if Okudah gets taken before the 7th spot. But if he is available at the 7th spot, the Panthers will go after him and get a surely lockdown corner, which they haven't had since Josh Norman had that pretty good year in 2015. So once again, I mean, this is a very important draft. Not only for Matt Rule, which is his first draft and stuff like that. It's a very important draft for David Tepper. Because David Tepper has made a lot of moves as the new owner of the Carolina Panthers. He's made a lot of changes that some people might not like. some of the changes are for the better, in my opinion, but he's made a lot of changes. And what if you've ever lived in the South or if you've ever been in the South, people in the South don't like change. So making all these changes, you've already made people mad. We'll see how it turns out for him and the Carolina Panthers. They're not necessarily in a win now mode, as Drew Brees coming back for the Saints, so the Saints might have that division locked down for just another year. But it's the NFC South. The NFC South is kind of a crazy division. Nobody won it back-to-back times until the Panthers did it a couple years ago. No one's won it 3 times in a row until the Panthers did it a couple years ago. The NFC South is truly just another wild card spot, because the Falcons can be good next year. The Buccaneers, depending on who they get for quarterback, could be great next year. Then, of course, the Panthers, we don't know. Are they going to be rebuilding, or are they going to be contending? We have no idea. It depends on how the draft goes, how Cam Newton is, how Joe Brady brings all of his concepts into the NFL. So we'll figure it out. I mean, the NFC South, man, it's crazy. I love watching it every single year. When we return, we'll talk about minor league promotions, one of my favorite things to talk about of all time, when we come back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So, one of my favorite things in sports is minor league promotions. Now, if you don't know any of the controversy going on with the minor league system in general, so there is a movement going on with the MLB where they could cut ties with a bunch of minor league teams to kind of save money, so minor leaguers can get their base pay raised a little bit and stuff like that. And they're going to cut teams based on attendance, based on facilities, based on a lot of different factors. I mean, they put out a list of all the teams that could get cut if things don't change, or if whatever the league accomplishes it. And I really don't like this. I mean, none of the teams that I enjoy are going to get affected by this new thing. But I know a lot of teams that are kind of in the middle of nowhere, and the people in that region, the only thing they have is the minor league baseball team. So, for instance, I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I mean, we have Atlanta 2 hours down. We got Charlotte 2 hours up. So, professional sports never will come to the state of South Carolina, because you have Atlanta right there. You got Charlotte right there. There's no reason to really build in South Carolina, because we're close enough to two other markets, so we're not going to get a professional team. So we kind of lean on minor league baseball teams, or minor league teams in general. We have like 3 minor league hockey teams in the state. We got 5 minor league baseball teams, I believe. So we kind of lean on minor league teams and college teams, of course, because it's the South. So minor league baseball teams are very important, especially for smaller communities. I mean, it gives them an identity. The same identity that Atlanta has with the Braves, or the same identity that St. Louis has with any of their teams, even with the Battlehawks of the XFL. There is a sense of identity there, and minor league baseball brings that sense of identity to a much smaller scale level, and taking away teams will be a travesty. But my favorite thing about minor league baseball is the insane marketing promotions that they do to try to get people to come to games. And I found one that was fantastic. So recently, the Pensacola Blue Wahoos they announced that they will have a legalized marinara night. And yes, you heard me correctly. I said marinara. Not I don't know what else you would think. So this will be on April 20th, 2020, which, if you don't know, April 20th is a very special date to a very specific demographic of the country who enjoys a certain hobby that may or may not be legal in your state, depending on where you live, and they're kind of making fun of it with a legalized marinara night. Which, what is a legalized marinara night? It will be a pasta-themed night. They will have pasta in the concession stands. They'll let people, I think there was a make-your-own pasta stand or something like that. There wasn't really that much information. I'm just kind of reiterating what I've heard on radio stations and stuff, but I couldn't find any actual, written information about the night. But that's fantastic. So that got me to thinking, what are the best minor league promotions that I could find? And there's not really a comprehensive list, but I found this one top 10 from 2016, so I thought let's just read through it, might as well. So we'll start with the Lake County Captains. They had a Good Grief Night, which the Good Grief Night is a Charlie Brown theme night. So this is an Indians Class A affiliate. They wore Charlie Brown style jerseys, which is basically just the Charlie Brown shirt as a baseball jersey. They won, so kind of the downside of it is they won. Charlie Brown will never win. What are you guys doing? Number 9, Staten Island Yankees. They had a Pat Van Dyke bobble arms. So they had a bobblehead. The head didn't bobble. The arms did. I'm just looking at it. So it's a dual bobbling arm figurine. So both arms have a baseball in it and they bobble. So it's funny. It's Charlotte Knights. They had a Space Jam night. Everybody loves Space Jam. They had Muggsy Bogues there to celebrate the film. So yeah, Charlotte Knights. They had a good old Space Jam night. The Altoona Curve had a Jar Jar Binks jerseys, which they had jerseys that literally had Jar Jar Binks' face on it, which Star Wars night is always a promotion for minor league baseball teams because a lot of people, I don't know if you know this, a lot of people like Star Wars. Even with, doesn't matter how you feel about the new movies or not, people like Star Wars no matter what. So Star Wars nights are always big because people like dressing up and doing that stuff. It's a lot of fun. But they had jerseys that had Jar Jar Binks' face on it, which, depending on who you are, you might not like that. But it's just a funny looking jersey. Please look it up. Then Portland Sea Dogs, they had a Field of Dreams game. They donned throwback 1926 Portland Eskimo jerseys, which, by the way, Portland Eskimos is a fantastic name. Players enter the field from a makeshift cornfield. That's pretty awesome. They lost the game, but it did go to 15 innings, which is a great length for a game devoted to Field of Dreams. Which that reminds me that they actually are going to be playing a game at the actual Field of Dreams in Iowa this season. It's going to happen July or something like that. But they tried their best. They made their own cornfield for people to run out of. Frisco Rough Riders had an 8-bit and arcade night. So they had arcade machines all over the concourse for people to play. And the team took the field in Game Boy jerseys, which these are actually pretty nice jerseys. I would love to have one of these. These are actually pretty dope. So yeah, that's a cool night. Video game nights are always pretty big. The Stockton Ports had asparagus night. God, asparagus night. Usually when we talk about food in the minor leagues, we're talking about things like pancake wrapped around a hot dog that is deep fried on top of the cheeseburger. But Stockton is just home to the Class A affiliate of the A's. It's also a major hub for asparagus growth in the United States. So they have the annual asparagus festival. So they had asparagus night, and they had jerseys with asparagus on them, and it looks so cheap but so great at the same time. The Brooklyn Cyclones, they had a salute to Seinfeld night, where they had a second spitter bobblehead, which if you don't know what the episode is, it's the second spitter. Just look it up. I can't really describe it very well to you, but that's pretty great. Love any Seinfeld related night. The California and Carolina League All-Star Break Midway Classic. They played on they had a home run derby on an aircraft carrier, which is just great. Players were knocking home runs into the actual ocean. And, yeah, that's just a cool thing to do, just to have it on a battleship and stuff like that. The Fresno Grizzlies had Taco Truck Throwdown, which is an annual event where the Fresno Grizzlies, every year they do this, they become the Fresno Tacos or something like that. They unveil new poncho-inspired taco caps and a whole other line of foods, and they have like taco-themed jerseys and stuff like that, and it's pretty great. So those are the top 10 from 2016. I couldn't really find a more recent one for some reason, but minor league baseball is fantastic. The promotions are great. Everything about it is fantastic. If you have a local minor league baseball team, please go to it, because they deserve everything, especially if they have great nights like that. I know, in my notes, I also have the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, which is a great name. They had a Ray Charles bobblehead night. They honored the former Florida School for the Deaf and Blind student. And they also had a fanny pack giveaway. That's going to be this year in September. So if you're going to a Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp game, get that fanny pack in September, or get a Ray Charles bobblehead. The Chicago Dogs will have a Mike Ditka bobblehead night, where Mike Ditka will actually manage the team on opening night, which is that is also a great promotion right there. So, minor league baseball, man, I love it. I love it a lot. I love it a lot. I don't know how to say it anymore, but it is great. But when we return, it's time for second edition of Bracket Mania. We'll be talking about Disney films. I have 16 Disney films, and we're going to narrow it down to one. The only Disney movie you will ever have to watch ever again. So, when we come back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
So, it's the second edition of Bracket Mania, where Thursday and Sunday show, I will be talking, unless a huge news story happens and there's just a lot to talk about, I will be doing brackets. Just random brackets on random things. Thursday I did candy, where I was lazy about it. I did it at the very last second. It was kind of just a spark, random moment thing. But today is a little bit more structured. So last year there was a huge bracket going around Twitter. It was the Disney versus Pixar bracket, where it pitted Disney movies on one side of the bracket and Pixar movies on the other, and you had to choose. Had to choose your favorite. There was a huge debate between me and my friends. A lot of people were arguing, yelling at each other. So I've decided to only do Disney. I might do Pixar later, might do Pixar on Thursday, but we're going to do the Disney side of that bracket today. So here are the matchups. You have Lion King versus Tarzan, Princess of the Frog versus Lilo Stitch, Tangled, Big Hero 6, Frozen, Moana, Aladdin, Hercules, Mermaid, Little Mermaid, Pocahontas, Mulan, Zootopia, Beauty and the Beast, Nightmare Before Christmas. So there you go. Those are the 16 movies. Let's get into it. We're going to start off with Lion King versus Tarzan, which is a huge, heavy-hitting first matchup. So I love The Lion King. The Lion King is a masterpiece. Music by Elton John and Hans Zimmer, by the way. The score is by Hans Zimmer. They remade it. The remake, meh. But It's good. Tarzan has Phil Collins, though. Phil Collins music. So purely based on music, this is a huge matchup here. Elton John, Phil Collins. But ultimately, I got to give it to Lion King here because I just have to. I really do. I have to give it to Lion King. I personally like Lion King a lot better than Tarzan, especially growing up. So I'm giving it to Lion King. Next up, Princess and the Frog versus Lilo Stitch. So Princess and the Frog, I watched once when it first came out, and I was like, okay. Then I watched it again, like last year or something like that. Really enjoyed it. I forgot how much I enjoyed that movie. It's a good movie. It gives New Orleans culture and stuff like that. Really great. Lilo and Stitch. I loved watching Lilo and Stitch TV show growing up. The movie is just as great. Has Hawaiian culture and stuff like that. So it's pretty much New Orleans versus Hawaii at this point. I personally have a bigger emotional attachment to Lilo and Stitch, although you could argue that Princess and the Frog is a better movie overall, but I'm going with Lilo and Stitch. Next up, we have Tangled versus Big Hero 6. So Tangled was a really funny movie, kind of a nice spin on an old fairy tale. Big Hero 6 was also a good movie, where you have big bubble robot guy saving stuff. I'm giving this one to Tangled. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not too knowledgeable about either of these. I think I watched both of them like maybe once or twice, and that was about it. It's not in my rotation of movies to watch, necessarily. So, I'm going to give this to Tangled. I really like Tangled. Tangled was a good movie to watch. Now, this is a heavy hitter. I'm going to get people angry at me about this one. Frozen versus Moana. So, Frozen, I can't get the song stuck in my head. But you want to know something else? I can't get Moana songs out of my head either. I've watched Moana maybe 10 times. My girlfriend loves Moana. My niece loves Moana. I've watched Moana way too many times for a 23-year-old male to do, to be honest. So this is an interesting one. Frozen, of course, was a cultural phenomenon. The second one came out. I haven't watched the second one. But it was a phenomenon. Let It Go was huge. Moana was not as huge. But I really liked Moana. I'm moving Moana on. I really liked Moana. I thought Moana was much better. So Aladdin, Hercules, this is also a tough one. Aladdin, classic. Of course, Hercules, not as much as a classic, but a lot of people do like it. I like the music of Hercules better than Aladdin, which is kind of a hot take, to be honest. But I'm moving Aladdin on. Aladdin is just overall a better movie. Little Mermaid versus Pocahontas is not even a battle for me. I'm moving Little Mermaid on. I don't like Pocahontas. It's kind of a boring movie. Mulan versus Zootopia. Zootopia is a really good movie, and Mulan is also a good movie. I think Mulan doesn't have enough. I think I might move Mulan on just because of the music. Other than that, Zootopia takes this 10 out of 10 times. So I'm actually going to move Zootopia on despite what I just said, because Mulan's music is really good, but everything else about the movie pales in comparison to Zootopia, in my opinion. Mulan's a great movie. I just want to say all these movies are great movies. I'm just choosing my personal favorites. Beauty and the Beast versus Nightmare Before Christmas. I don't really care about this one. Neither of these I don't really care about. Nightmare Before Christmas is great, but I don't really consider it a Disney movie, even though it technically is. I'll go Beauty and the Beast. I'll go with the classic there. Now we move on to Lion King. Second round, by the way. Lion King versus Lilo and Stitch. So I mentioned Lilo and Stitch. I watched the show a lot as a kid. But Lion King, Hakuna Matata, man, means no worries for the rest of my days. Lion King moves on. Just cultural impact of Lion King on little Josh. It's just too much. Tangled versus Moana. As I mentioned, I kind of moved Tangled on just because it was facing Big Hero 6, to be honest. Big Hero 6, great movie. Love it. It's adorable. But like I said, I've only watched it like once. So Moana moves on here in this round. Aladdin versus Little Mermaid. So let me preface this. Little Mermaid, my sister loves. This is my sister's favorite Disney movie, and I watched it a lot just because my sister watched it a lot. And Aladdin is a great movie as well. I love the genie, love Robin Williams. The remake I liked. It was too similar. They didn't really do anything different, but whatever. So Aladdin I really like. However, Little Mermaid's got to move on, man. That's a good movie. Little Mermaid moves on. Zootopia versus Beauty and the Beast. Now I'm going to let you know. I don't like Beauty and the Beast. I just don't. So Zootopia is probably going to move on here. Zootopia will move on, as Beauty and the Beast is just not up to par, in my opinion. I don't like Beauty and the Beast that much. Round 3, we're moving on to the semis. This is a tough one for me right here. Lion King versus Moana. Now, I'm going to have to really discuss this to myself real quick. So, Lion King, you have Simba. I mean, it's Hamlet. I mean, everybody knows that it's Hamlet, basically. But you have Simba, who needs to defeat his uncle to free his name of, to revenge his father and to clear his name for, not killing his father and stuff like that. Then Moana, you have this girl whose dad really doesn't like her going to the ocean, and so she goes to the ocean and faces a volcano monster. That's a terrible way to describe that movie. But like I said, Lion King had a huge cultural impact on me when I was growing up. I sang Hakuna Matata all the time. I just loved everything about Lion King. I have a Lion King bowl that I had when I was younger, and I still have it to this day. So Lion King will move on. My girlfriend will hate me for that, though. Next up, we have Little Mermaid versus Zootopia. Now, Zootopia has made it pretty far so far, just because I really liked it. However, Little Mermaid's a classic. It really is. Really is. Little Mermaid will move on, and then we have the toughest final I could possibly think of. Little Mermaid versus Lion King. Now, these are both movies that I watched all the time as a kid. One was because my sister watched it all the time. One was because I loved that movie. So, let's think about this. My one gripe with Little Mermaid is that it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. She gave up talking to be with a dude. That makes no sense. Lion King makes sense. I'm just saying. That's how I feel. Lion King makes sense to me. Little Mermaid, there's some inconsistencies, Oof. I'm choosing Lion King. Lion King wins. Lion King is my Disney movie. Lion King wins this bracket. If you want to yell at me, you can, of course. You can yell at me at Strickland_Josh on Twitter. Thank you for listening, everybody. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Listen to everybody else on the GSMC Podcasting Network. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed my bracket idea. If you don't, let me know. Then I can stop it right in the tracks and I can figure something else to talk about at the end of every show. But I think it's just a fun thing for me. It's a nice brain exercise for me to kind of think through things. But thank you for listening, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. And I'll talk to you on Tuesday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.